I went to a workshop and the artist was just switching to pastels. And he said, "Have you ever tried these?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Well, let's give it a try." So that was it. He showed me a few little things, and that was 20 years ago.
All right. Hey, everybody. This is Phil McNally with Artist to Artist, and we're a subsidiary of Art Speak, and we're here today with another painter. Of course, I go out and get all sorts of painters. That's just this. I think it's a bug I've got. I don't know. It's just, but I do that. I've got a kind of a different type of a painter than I normally have. I know we talk mainly about oils and acrylics and less like that. And I've got another one here who is a pastel painter, but also an oil painter. So we'll discuss more of that. I have Tom Christopher. Tom, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
We appreciate that. Tom, we're going to get into your life and into your paintings, and I hope you don't mind that too much. But it's like I came across Tom just researching around, and his pastels just struck me, and I said, okay, this is different because I don't do pastels, and his pastels seem to kind of pop to a certain degree that I don't know. And in fact, it led to other discussions I had with other people on pastels themselves. Okay, because I had some people ask me, what are pastels and how they use and what do they look like and what do you not do with them? What do you do with them? So I brought Tom on board to help us answer those questions. So what we'll do is we'll talk about Tom, a little bit about your background, Tom, and you can kind of tell me where you're located since it is wintertime and everything, and kind of how's the weather and your life and how you got into all of this. And not that you want to get out of it. I don't want to hear about that, but getting into it. So why don't you go? Give us some stuff.
Sure, I'm from Central Iowa. I've lived here all my life. I started painting in high school with oils. Through college, I went to college in the 70s. So you can kind of imagine what kind of art I was exposed to then. And realism was not one of them. So I kind of stood by myself there for a long time. Um, After college, I continued in oil painting. And a couple of years later, I think I went to a workshop and somebody introduced me to pastels. The instructor just switched, part time from oils to pastels. And he was just experimenting. He says, "Well, give these a try." He gave me a few and I took them home. And for 2 or 3 years, my pastels were awful. So I continued, and I think pastels kind of developed too along that
Yeah.
line. Albert Handel was starting with sanded paper, which is what most artists use now, and he was using an underpainting of watercolor, which was unheard of. So I took a couple of his workshops, and he really made the change for me, I think, because all of a sudden I could combine painting with pastels, which was actually my goal. I love them both. So I put my oils away and I haven't touched them now for 20 years. And just recently I brought them out and started using oils again. So it's been kind of a circle for me. Um, I've won several major awards, including the International Association of Pastel Societies. I was awarded second place in the plein air online thing that's going on this year. So that'll be submitted for the final award at the end of the year. So that was pretty exciting for me. I've been doing workshops now for 20 years. I'm kind of going online more instead of doing in-person workshops, which is really nice. I'm on Patreon, Facebook, Instagram. I have a website. I've really spread myself around. And at my age, that's something in itself, I guess.
Yeah, I noticed because I do the same thing. The older I get, the harder it is to spin. So it's just like I'm trying my best and get there. But
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot to it.
yeah, yeah. So that's pretty much it.
That's cool. I mean, it's just uh, pastels to me has not been my bailiwick. Mine has been mainly well, I started out charcoal and did
Mhm.
charcoal stuff, and then did love the black and whites, and then got into the black and whites of oils, and then found out that everything has to take so long to dry, you know.
Yeah.
I can't just throw it on, and I found acrylics, and then you went down. I think everybody has their own street that they go down, and it's like, okay, we got here this way and we got here that way, and it was like, okay, now where are we at today? But I've noticed on your site there's just so much art that you've done in pastels, as far as just a look and a feel that I have not really come across. Not that I haven't investigated some pastels, but I've never seen it to the point where I just love oils. I mean, oils have so much vibrancy and so much color transition. Even when I went to acrylics, I came back to the oils because I
Mhm.
couldn't get that out of acrylics. And the pastel that you put out, uh, I I think it's pretty close sometimes to oil. Uh,
Yeah, I've had a mistaken for oils quite a few times when, especially online, when you can't see them in person. They come off as oils a lot of times. So, and
I
that's
went
basically the underpainting.
Yeah, and we'll talk about your process, but you know, I'll throw this little caveat in. I went to a little town here in Texas, down, I guess it's under Fort Worth, and I went into this gallery, and I saw some really this one three pieces of art that was done by a Navajo Indian, and they were black and whites, and they were just absolutely beautiful. And I'm going to try to get hold of this guy to put on the podcast because this was just phenomenal stuff. But there was this one painting, small painting, not large. It was just kind of sitting on the floor, and I went over there to look at it. It was a landscape, and I said, "Oh, that looks really kind of nice." I mean, I really enjoyed that. And I asked the lady, said, "You know, that's done in oils, right?" Or I wasn't sure if it was acrylic or oils. And she said, "No, that's pastel." I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, she said, "No, it's a pastel." And it looked so much like an oil. I mean, it was just amazing how close it got. So I take it that in the pastels I've seen myself, and I'll just throw this out there, the pastels that I've seen have been somewhat dulled.
Right,
They just don't come out vibrant,
right.
and yours happen to be. And is that a process to get there?
It is, right, because I really wanted to emulate oils as much as I could with these pastels. So in the underpainting process, I use acrylic a lot, and it has texture.
Hmm.
And then I apply a fine or a light coat of fine pumice gel, which is a golden product that has pumice in it, and that provides the surface for the pastel. However, you still have texture. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
it's built
So
up of
so
paint.
so you said something about pastels being done on sandpaper, right? I
I
mean,
don't use sandpaper. I
but
use
but
gator board.
Gator board. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm understanding correctly, and correct me if I'm not, is there a certain texture that pastels needs underneath it? It can't be a flat, smooth. Like I use linen for my oils, and that is smooth, smooth. I mean,
Right.
pastels would not work good on that.
Um, if you're going to use sanded paper, that has the surface for pastels. That's made especially for pastels. However, if you apply acrylic paint to this instead of before you add the pastel,
Hmm.
you would need a surface on top of that acrylic in order to provide a nice smooth stroke with your pastel. It still has a slight texture to it, but sandpaper for the most part is flat and does not have that oil appearance that you do with the build-up underpainting. Hope that makes sense. But
you need some sort of roughness on the canvas somewhere in
right.
order for a pastel to work correctly. It will not work
In my
well
process, right.
okay. So
Yeah.
another person's process, could they use like an MDF board or something that's absolutely smooth, and the pastel would take to that, or would it take to it differently than what you're talking about?
If you had a smooth board, let's say you had a sheet of plywood, or
Yeah,
and you want to do a pastel painting, you still would have to apply a pastel coating over the top. Excuse me, pumice
a
coating
pumice.
over the top,
Okay.
which sandpaper is made out of pumice and sand, and that would provide enough surface for the pastel to stay put, stay put and adhere to. Otherwise, it'd just blow off. It would be too smooth for the pastel.
So pastel's kind of like a chalk, right? I mean,
Well,
it's a dust kind of
yeah,
thing.
they associate it with chalk. Chalk is a really cheap form of pigment.
Hmm.
Um, Pastel is actually pure pigment without the oil. It's made into a stick with some binder, but it's really intense and deep and full of color. So you want to retain that. And like you said, a lot of pastels become cloudy and really don't have that light. And I think that comes also from too many passes, too many strokes on top of each other with dull.
Oh, okay.
One clean stroke. Tony Elena, another famous, not another famous, but a famous pastel artist, um, he reduces his strokes so you can see the vibrance of that pure pastel coming through. He usually doesn't put two passes over pastel. It's just one stroke and he moves on. So you want to keep that nice, deep, rich color and hue.
It's interesting that you would say that because, I've interviewed several artists that were alla primas,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not an alla prima artist. I'm a more of a layered artist. So that's why I like acrylic, and that's why I kind of like, I also like oils, but there's a difference between the alla prima, because the alla prima kind of sounds like this is going up that same road, that
Right,
you just have a amount on the brush and you bring it across and you kind of dabble it in with one stroke, and you don't go back over it. You leave it
right,
alone. And if you want to add more variance on that, then you grab another brush full of paint and then swab at that again or stroke it down again. Is that so? It sounds like pastels are in the same kind of
well, I
category too,
kind of
sir.
treat them that way. Yeah, I kind of do. I try not to put too many passes on because you'll lose that pumice texture and it becomes too smooth, just like
Because you're
so.
building up more pastels
Right.
on top of that, correct?
When I first started, there's a paper called Canson. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a pastel,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Hmm.
and that taught me about the strokes you lay down on a piece of paper. It has to be so light and feather light almost, so you can add pastel over the top. So it's just a light cast. The first pass is just a real light cast on Canson. Um, I've kept that stroke, and each layer I put on, and it's just a little deeper and a little more pressure. So it's just a buildup of. Otherwise, if you lay down a heavy stroke right away, that's it. You can't do much with it. You can't put anything over the top. You can't take anything away. But if you keep it nice and light through the process, and then maybe the third pass or so, you can put some pressure on it and start filling in those dark areas. But you want to bring
Interesting.
that underpainting through the pastel a little more.
Yeah, we'll talk
Yeah.
a little bit more on the underpainting. I'm going to bring up a painting of yours that's on the site, and it's called "It's the Light." And I think this one is just what got me more toward you, calling you,
Right.
is because this one is just absolutely amazing to me, because it does like it has stroke, uh, oil stroke more than anything else. Because there, um, I see colors and out of this thing that's just, and values that I cannot see how you would probably get from a pastel itself. So give me an idea on how this started. I mean, give me a background as far as I know that you found, I guess, photo reference or whatever on this, or was at this place, and just how did you get to the point of starting this, and how'd you do that?
Yes, I think that painting is 22 by 28, so it's fairly large, about the same size as this one. It's either 18 or 24 or 22 by 28. I usually keep those sizes. This scene is actually less than a mile from our home. So I just go by this. I walk by it every day when I'm walking the dog. And our house sits up on that hill where the light is.
Yeah.
Our house is just to the left of that. So the light comes right from the east, southeast. This was a morning, I believe. Yeah, a morning. And I think, I don't have it with me, but it was like early spring, early summer, I think. There's a place on that hill or bluff or whatever you want to call it that had some fallen ground where it's got some kind of red clay in it. Is that
Right.
showing through there? That was so interesting to me that I wanted to capture that. So I went down, took some sketches, a lot of photographs. And like I say, for probably 2 or 3 weeks, I walked the dog by this every day. So I had a pretty good feeling. Actually, we've climbed that hill, the dog and I, so it goes right to our house. So I think if you really want to paint something and get the feel for it, you have to know the area. It's nice to take photographs and all that, but if you're out there with the wind blowing and the air and the noise and all that stuff, the textures when the dog runs up there, it gets full of burrs and his feet are all covered with them. So all that stuff, if you keep that in mind when you're painting, then I think you'll come out ahead. The sun was just right. It just started to come up, and it was probably already risen, but it had such a glow through those trees, most of them elm and maple.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
Kind of showing across the road there. So
yeah, the composition itself is amazing. I mean, the light of where it is and how you've put it onto canvas. Well, this is not necessarily on canvas, correct?
Right.
What is it on?
Gator board.
Gator board.
Right.
How you put it there is amazing. How you played with the light and made this happen. So let's delve into this just a little bit. How would this painting have started for you as far as a pastel artist? How do they start a painting?
Oh, the process, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. I did a black and white. This is on, I think, 18 by 24, if I think about it, which just a acrylic black and white. I'll sketch out my design with the paintbrush. If I use a pencil or a magic marker, it becomes automatically too tight for me. So I have to stand up on the easel. I don't sit, and I use my whole arm when I'm drawing something out. I'm not, sketching like this. I'm sketching like this. So I'd like to keep it loose to start with. And that's why I like underpainting so much, because I can throw paint, I can make a mark and walk back, and I move it around the studio.
I mean, you almost have to do that. You almost have to do that just to get your proportion correct. I mean, in the composition. But what is it that you're using to sketch out?
Just acrylic,
a
black paint, the cheap stuff, And
yeah,
I water it down quite a bit, and if I get the design I like, and then I start with other strokes, heavier strokes, and filling in the dark areas. So it becomes a black and white painting, basically.
Okay.
A lot of times, if I've got colors that I want to focus on, I'll add some more acrylic paint, like green or red. Those areas that really catch my attention. hill with that nice warm red. I don't know if it's clay or just red dirt that was, I think, in the middle of the design there was really something for me. So I wanted to make sure, and I captured that early with acrylic paint.
So
So
how far do you build up on the acrylic as far as I would consider that it's like me too. It's a sketching process. It's
right,
laying it out. How deep in detail do you go pretty deep in the detail, or do you just keep it
no,
pretty
no,
simple?
I save the details for the pastels. Mine are just large shapes and probably medium application. I don't put it on with a palette knife or anything. Um, when I'm done with that underpainting, sometimes I will sand it down lightly if it's too aggressive, because even though the fine pumice gel I use will cover up a lot of those really harsh areas, I don't really put that gel on too thick because I still want to get a nice feel for that nice kind of bumpy texture that I work on.
And that gel is considered clear, right? I mean, you can
Right.
see through it and everything like that, so you have no problem putting it on. So to me, I'm from the acrylic standpoint, um, I'm an acrylic person to a degree that you can build up a lot of layers that it does
Right.
generate some bumps. And I like the idea of sanding it down because I never thought
Mm-hmm.
about that. That's kind of a good idea if it gets
Mm-hmm.
too bumpy, because this is an underpainting, correct?
Right.
Okay.
I think too that in order to get that vibrant color or light, as you said, what am I trying to think here? The underpainting will catch light, even though you put the
Yes.
pastel of it. So if you've got a textured surface, it will attract the light and leave really minute shadows. So I think that's what gives it that 3D.
Oh, I see.
Just
Yes.
like an oil painting would do a lot of times. If you really put a heavy application of oil paint on, it'll leave shadows. So sanding it down is kind of a matter of preference. And I'm so used to working this way.
Mm-hmm.
If I sand it too much, I immediately know it. I'll add more acrylic to it. I hope this is making sense. It's
Oh,
kind of, oh,
it's
okay.
as far as from a prep side, yeah, it's making a lot of sense. I
Okay.
mean, it really kind of says what you do in order to get to where you're going, and it also says that you just don't do everything, and keep it compositionally correct. I work a lot with the no tan scenario. Is that make sure that you get your dark objects and then your medium objects and your light objects, and make sure that they're just objects. They're not detailed so degree that it just you lost it, because an underpainting is different than a painting as far as I'm
Right.
concerned. It's like
Right.
it's prep work. It's making sure that it works for what you are next going to do
Right.
on it, that you can take it from that point on to finish it out. If you finish it out at the underpainting level, and I've seen this done on still lifes and portraits, which does work. I've done grayscale, imprimatura, and type of oh god, I forget what it's called, but it's an underpainting type that is grayscale to a value that it is actually the full painting itself, but it is all grayed, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then they come in. I've seen artists come in beautifully, in fact, with oils on top, and it's almost, to me, it's more like a wash than it is. I've got to get every single part with the right color.
Right.
And I find that process also well, and that process is more done on portraits and really fine art still lifes than it is done on landscapes. I do not see this much on landscapes at all when they go down that road, as far as we're going to take the underpainting to the detail that it's just a black and white basically photo of what I'm doing. And you are not doing that, and that's good for most artists, because if you spend all of that time and all of that effort with this next process that you're talking about, after you put the pumice on, you're probably going to cover it up anyway to a certain
Yeah,
degree. I mean, you're going to come in with
yeah,
your own art technique and say, okay, I want to put this on and this on and this on, whether it's done with a with your pastel, or whether it's done with a brush stroke of oil paint. It doesn't matter. You can cover that up. So keep it simple. Great part there. So you get your underpainting done. You got your underpainting done. You got it to where you're good with it from the value side of it, as far as you've got your darks in, you got your lights in, you're good at it from a texture side of it with the pumice on top, that you've kind of gotten everything that you need in there. um, then what do you do?
well, then it's ready for pastels. And I find if I do a real extensive underpainting, I don't use nearly as much pastel as I used to.
Okay.
So as far as an economical, you know, point, it saves me on buying expensive pastels all the time. So that's another note. But when it comes to entering a competition like the International Association of Pastel Societies, it has to be 80% pastel, the top layer. So even though it has to be 80%, it doesn't have to be that thick. So you can just cast over, and if they touch it, and it's got pastel on it. So that's just a little trick I developed through the years, I guess.
Well, yeah, it's like the still life was saying, that artists can come in and get the underpainting done so well that I mean, all the
Yeah,
lights and shadows are in there to such a degree that it becomes a more of a wash of just
right.
stroking over than
I
having to say, go
yeah.
ahead.
To go further, I think that I prefer doing underpainting because it does help with the pastel so much that I'm just matching the values with the color. Without the underpainting, I think I would struggle quite a bit. I do outside painting quite a bit, but those are just notes and study. So I don't really complete a painting outside. So just another thought.
It's a good thought. It's the light and the painting that's behind you, and all the other art that I've seen from you has similarities to it that I have over the past month on my talks. I've kind of pushed to a certain degree, because there are in It's the Light, you have this green mossy type of foliage that's on this little bunker hill here, and some of it is in orange and some of it or light red, orangish, and then green, and then different values of green. uh, but nothing on these stand out by themselves
Right.
to where it just pops. And noticing the painting behind you, it's the same friggin' thing I'm seeing back there as well. It's nothing that's just stands out and pops. So you are taking, like an oil painter, you are taking a series of pastel colors and throwing them on there, but each one, especially in your case more than an oil painter's case, oil painter can tone down oil paint. How do you, such as It's the Light and the one behind you and your others, how do you keep it toned down? Because I'm thinking, isn't pastel, I mean, if it's pure pigment, you don't get the value area of that. If you want a lighter, not a lighter, a darker blue on the same color blue that it comes out of the pastel, but I just need it a little toned down. How do you work that?
Yeah, and that's the same way with distance. You know, you want to cool things down when you talk about temperatures. So
Right.
either gray it down or cool it down. I've done both here. There's some um, warm purples back here that you don't see, but you can pick up the tone a little bit. It's just a little, and there's a, and you soften it. Well, I know a lot of pastel students of mine are into this, taking their hand and rubbing it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
kind of blend it, kind of.
Okay.
And that, all that does for me is as my fingers get black and dirty, and then it ends up dirty in the whole thing. So when I was taking workshops from Handel, he was tapping it with a beaver towel instead of rubbing it like this. I thought, that's it. And I asked him, and he says, yeah, I'm just taking the top layer off a little bit. So that smooths. That also creates this kind of harmonizing that's going on back.
Right.
This is actually one shape, but within those shapes, there's different tones, and that's done with the paper towel base, just softening edges. I hope that's answering your question.
I believe it is.
Okay, so, and then as you come forward, this hasn't been touched with the paper towel or Viva towel. This is all texture. As I go back in the distance, it becomes a little blurred, and that's all not by rubbing it, by tapping the top layer of pastel.
Okay.
And softening these edges. So
that's good.
And if I want to cool it down, I'll take a light cast of blue or gray and just very lightly go across the whole thing here. And probably in this case, if I wanted to light up this area, I would just cast a nice warm light here and keep this cool back here. It's just a real light feather-like cast with the pastel.
So you're casting, when you're casting a pastel, it is the amount of pressure that you're putting on that pastel itself in order to do that.
Yep.
Where in oil painting, and I'll throw acrylic in there too. I mean, if you do what you're calling casting, I mean, to us, it's more of just a layer or wash over another color that's on top, or that's underneath.
Almost like glazing.
Yeah, okay. It's almost like that. Yeah, I know what glazing is.
Yeah, the same thing.
So all of Tom's work is really nice, and those people who want to see his work, he's at tomchristopherartist.com. He's got lots of other art out there of his pastel work. So those people who are interested in pastels, he does have workshops, and he does have ways of just looking at pastel. And we've talked a lot about pastel, and I don't want to take any more of your day, but I do appreciate the time that you did give me.
Well, it's been fun. I enjoyed this. I don't get a chance to talk on my work that much. I'm kind of isolated here, and that's by self-imposed, I guess. But
well,
that's how I work. So that's the way it is.
That's where I'm finding a lot of artists are. And I think what I'm going to do, based upon that statement that you made, I'm going to start calling up on other artists that I've already interviewed who are, I think, also self-imposed, and then say, hey, I'm going to wake them up. So I'm going to come back and I'll wake you up too, and we'll talk again.